And especially remember, he's married again, he's married to Berry Gordy's sister, had been for 13 years, and she probably is good and ticked off that this man is talking about he gonna go down on this new girl when he probably never went downtown to the window shop. She's like, I know Anna was probably like, you better get your ass over here and practice on me first. You talking about? What's going on, everybody? You're right on time for another ride on the Groove Line with your boy Chris Stevens. Hopefully, you all are doing well out there. Hopefully, you had a wonderful weekend. Spring is upon us. Spring is actually this Friday. So, even though it's still kind of wintry in certain areas, like where I live, you will find that we're getting closer to longer days, warmer temperatures, and better times. So, we're almost there, folks. Hang in there. But anyway, we are celebrating today the 50th anniversary of the release of one of the most famous albums of the 70s and one of the most famous albums from one of the most famous artists of the 70s. We're talking about Marvin Gaye Jr. and I Want You, which was released on March 16th, 1976 on Tamla Records, which of course is was a subsidiary, pardon me, of Motown Records. Now, the backstory of I Want You is so very interesting because the album itself, most of the songs were already pre-recorded and pre-written. This was a collaborative project between Leon Ware and T-Boy Ross, who of course was Diana Ross's younger brother, and they were both staff writers from Motown. So this was sort of like a collaborative project between those two. But Berry Gordy heard those demos and said, "Nah, we giving them to Marvin." And Leon and T-Boy said, "Okay." But apparently there was a bit of a misunderstanding between T-Boy and Leon, and T-Boy was escorted off the project, shall we say. So it was Leon Ware and Marvin's baby for the most part, their vehicle. And remember, Marvin had put out Let's Get It On just about a couple years earlier because his album was recorded. Bulk of it was recorded in 75. A little bit was recorded in the beginning of 1976. And Marvin, I don't know if he felt like he wanted to do the Love Man thing again. I mean, even though granted, Let's Get It On had been so very successful for him. And it just, I mean, I don't know if it made sense for him to do another album, but then again, you had to remember at this point in his life, and we got to talk about it, as unfortunate as it is now. I mean, you couldn't get a pass for what Marvin did in 76 and 2026, but we have to discuss it. So at this time, Marvin was 37 years old, 36, 37 years old, dating 18, 19-year-old Janice Hunter, or of course, who would later become Jan Gay, his second wife. And they had two babies by this point. So he's still chasing this romantic dream, this dream life. If you've never oh my God, if you have never read Divided Soul by David Ritz, it is the greatest music biography ever. I stand on that. There are some great ones out there, but Divided Soul by David Ritz tells you the whole dirty lowdown about Marvin Gaye's 44 years and 364 days of life. I highly recommend you check it out. So looking back on that, I mean, this is a dude who is definitely living in a conundrum. I mean, he's still married to Anna Gordy, by the way, who is Berry Gordy's older sister. So when you think about that, this is a dude who's still married to the chairman's sister and is shacking up with a girl who can't even drink yet. So it's very, very awkward at this point in Marvin's career when I Want You comes about. But it becomes one of the most famous albums of all time because I'm going to put this back up on the screen for you lovely people real quick. The cover art. There we go. The cover art. Of course, it is the Sugar Shack painting by the legendary Ernie Barnes, who, of course, was a football player at North Carolina Central. I think he did play in the NFL for a little bit, but he went on to greater fame for, his horn figures and, illustrations like this. And it just became one of the most famous images of the decade, especially in black circles, because that same Sugar Shack painting is in the intro and outro from Good Times. So the Sugar Shack painting is just one of those things that, is just a part of black culture that only black people get and only black people should get. But the songs themselves, I mean, it starts off with the title track. I mean, if you're going to start off an album called I Want You, you better start off with something forceful, and the title track is it. For one, Ray Parker Jr.'s guitar work on that is just absolutely scintillating. Like, this is before Ray Parker Jr. went on to, form Radio and to become Ray Parker Jr., the solo artist, which we've covered before on this channel. And his guitar work on the I Want You title track is absolutely scintillating. I mean, it's just, it just screams, it screeches, it fuzzes. He was a guitar genius, man. And he was one of those session guys that always got the call. Like if you need somebody to really put some stank on it or put some funk on it or put some rock influence into it, you better go get Ray Parker Jr. Or it was just Ray Parker. I mean, maybe it was just Ray Parker Jr. Or maybe he always went by Ray Parker Jr. I mean, even though he wasn't famous yet, but I mean, I'm sure he definitely wanted to, carry his father's name correctly. So he probably was Ray Parker Jr. at that time. But anyway, so I want you. I mean, it starts off, with Ray's. And here comes Marvin talking about, I want you the right way, but I want you to want me too. And that's the album in a nutshell. I've always listened to it because this was the first album I obsessively studied when I was in college. Because I had read a book by Michael Eric Dyson, The Art, Mercy, Mercy Me, The Arts, Loves, and Demons of Marvin Gaye. And I read that book from cover to cover, and I was enthralled with how Dr. Dyson was able to get so much out of the I Want You album, from Art Stewart, the engineer, Leon Ware, who was still living at that point in time, a couple other folks, and really dug into why that album is probably the most underrated in Marvin Gaye's catalog, even though it's very 70s famous. It's very black famous too. But, Marvin had such a run prior to I Want You. I mean, people probably dismissed it. I mean, critics talked about, with Barry White on the wane, Marvin Gaye is the new soul philosopher in the bedroom, or tries to anyway. Whatever the critique was. I mean, it was very corny, but I digress. The critique anyway. But yeah, I Want You, he's talking about, don't play with something you should cherish for life. Don't you want to care? Hey, it's lonely out there. Like, not only is he talking to this woman, he's talking to himself. He's like, I need to stop all of my shenanigans so I can be the man for you and you can be the woman for me, because it's lonely out here. I mean, yeah, we having fun with all these different people, but the reality is we should only be having this covenant with each other. So as much as Marvin is talking to a woman when he sings that line, he's talking to himself too. So you got that. And then you have Come Live With Me, Angel. Come live with me. Come Live With Me, Angel, which of course G Unit and Joe Thomas sampled for I Wanna Be a Lover. And I gotta say that's one of the worst samples ever. Probably because I'm not a 50 Cent fan, and I mean, 50 Cent is just not a person that appeals to me as a rapper or as a human being for that matter. But enlisting Joe for that is just kind of like lowbrow, because Joe is such a talented musician and a singer. He can make chicken salad out of chicken. And that sample is just not a fan. But the actual Come Live With Me, Angel, I mean, Marvin is like, all right, now that I told you that I want you, let me tell you how you can live with me. You're going to live with me in comfort. I want to be your lover. I want to give it to you 3 times a day in all the ways, baby. Like, for 1976, that is very risque. Even though people, again, there's still some innuendo, there's still some clever writing there. It's not like he's saying, I'm gonna, put your legs on my shoulders. I'm not going to hit you from the back. You're not going to ride this baloney pony or none of that. He just said it 3 times a day in all the ways. You can let your imagination do the work with that. So, I mean, and then he talks about being locked up for days and all of that, just going at it for days at a time. Because who among us hasn't had a good weekend romp, whether it be in our respective homes or in hotels, or never mind. Too much information. Sorry. But yeah, Come Live With Me, Angel. It's another one of those songs that, that sets the mood for the album. And then, of course, there's the After the Dance instrumental, which, again, going into Dr. Dyson's book, this was sparked by Marvin picking up on some horns and strings clashing in the original mix. And he's like, it's getting on my damn nerves. We got to clean this up. And somebody got the bright idea to say, well, Marvin, you play keys, don't you? Yep. He's like, have you ever played a Moog? No, but I bet I could. Like, all right, let's go get that Moog from down the street. Now, mind you, in 76, synthesizers and keyboards, they were not the things that musicians play with now. Like, for example, I have a keytar. I have not a keytar, it's a Nectar MIDI keyboard. You could get sounds out of this. Like I said, I'm going to start playing this at some point. I'm going to start fooling around with this, make some beats, and put them on this channel so y'all can laugh at me. But yeah, so, I mean, this is what a 2020 synthesizer could be like. But in 1976, synthesizers were about the size of a refrigerator or an oven. So you had to roll that MFer from one studio to the next. So there was a so Marvin was just had just opened up Marvin's Room at the time. It was just called the Marvin Gaye Studio then. Now it's called Marvin's Room. And he was down the street from Motown West Recording Studios. So they had to go get the Moog from Motown West and wheel that bitch down Sunset Boulevard to Marvin's Room and have him play this really eerie sort of, you know, 70s pornish synth line that cleans up his clash notes that has irritated him to no end. And then there's a flute solo at the end from Ernie Watts that just, kind of sort of, you know, sweetens it up a little bit. So yeah, the After the Dance instrumental is just one of those things where, you find that musicians and creative people are really anal about, making sure, perfectionism and making sure what they want is what they want. And Marvin was just like, apparently this was about a week before the album was due. So at this point, if you guys are not familiar, if an album is about to go to print or whatever, go to publication, go to distribution, most of the stuff is already done. We're talking overdubs, we're talking sweetening sessions with horns and strings and all of that stuff. Any edits, any vocal overdubs, all of that stuff is usually done. But a week before the album comes out, Marvin picks up on this horn and string clash and says, "I can't put this album out like this." And people are like, "Marv, we got to put this out, man. Barry Gordy has invested $1 million in this. He's going to hand you $1 million check. Let's just turn it in." Marvin said, "No, I want this cleaned up." And so he said, all right, man, let's go get the damn Moog and get this dude out of our hair." And that's what happened. And then it goes into Feel All My Love Inside. Now, when I say porn, when I mention 70s porn, here are the women moaning in the background again. And in the very intro, Marvin says, "Let's get naked." And now he starts singing, "Well, now we're making love." And then he sings, "Where did you get such sweet sugar?" Again, more 70s innuendo. He didn't say she got the WAP, the Snapdragon or none of that. He just asked her, "Girl, where did you get this sweet sugar?" It's a little easy. As a child of millennial age, because this album came out 5.5 years before I was born, so it wasn't like I was there when people were listening to this. But people have been freaky forever. So Marvin Gaye asking a woman in 1976, "Where did she get such sweet sugar?" Really not that groundbreaking, but it just was, I guess, classier. I guess, a little more intelligent. I think what it was that artists and musicians and producers respected their audience's intelligence, because you didn't have to say things like, and granted, I'm a fan of WAP. I did a whole episode on WAP because I loved how it just pissed people off, made people freak out. But back then, people used to write and sing about sex in a way that just made it sound so much more intimate, classy, and fun. And yeah, asking a woman, "Where'd you get such sweet sugar?" That's one of my favorite lines on the album. And then, of course, it goes into the intro. Not the intro, the interlude. Marvin's cover of "I Want to Be Where You Are." Now, mind you, the version that Michael Jackson sings, "Can it be I stayed away too long," is nothing like what Marvin sings in this little, 80-second, clip. "I want to be where you are." Like the instrumentation itself, that's probably one of my favorite instrumental tracks of the decade, because it just sounds like it's a night living in like the city somewhere, like you've got like a high rise apartment or a condo or something, and you're just kicking it with your significant other or whoever, and y'all are just vibing, and that horn line, man, "I want to be where you are." But it's really just him saying goodnight to his kids in Jan. He says, "Good night, children. Good night, Nona. Good night, little Frankie." Of course, his second son, Frankie, was named after his brother Frankie, and little Marvin, who of course was Marvin Gaye III. He says, "I'll always love you, Janice." So he was just pretty much, that whole album is a declaration of love to Jan Gaye. God rest her soul too. So, when you think about it, it's just he went so many places, with this album to kind of sort of, you know, confirm and cement his fidelity to Jan, even though he would, if you've read Divided Soul, know that that was anything but the case. So we get to side B, and then there's the you know, the there's two I Want You instrumentals. I've skipped the first one. I mean, there was one in the first um on side A that's only about 20 seconds long. But the instrumental I Want You on side B goes a little longer. I mean, it's really just the same stuff. I mean, it's just the same instrumental, just without any words. Like, you get to hear just how searing Ray Parker Jr.'s guitar work is on that song. And then we get into probably my favorite song on the album from an instrumental standpoint, but it's also probably the most mean spirited song on the album, All the Way Around. And you're probably wondering, people are probably like, Chris, what do you mean it's mean spirited? Just listen to what Marvin is saying in that song. You know, how you going to act this time around? Before we get down to it, let's get some understanding. You know, you just ran away from me. You're so bad, baby, but I must like you like that. You know, you won't let me control this whole thing. Like, Marvin was very much a chauvinist and a man who because you got to remember, Marvin Gaye was born near the tail end of the Great Depression, 1939. And he lived in a very conflicted household. His father was a Pentecostal minister who might have been on the down low. And his mother, was a woman of that age who did whatever her husband said, whether that was, allowing him to whoop up on the kids or just, wear her clothes, which actually happened. I mean, it's been confirmed that Marvin Gaye Sr. liked to wear his wife's clothes. So imagine, you're a sensitive, shy kid anyway. Your father doesn't really care for you, and he's beating you and your siblings from stem to stir, and he's wearing your mother's clothes. So Marvin grew up a very conflicted human being, not excusing the cocaine, not excusing pursuing a 17-year-old girl and grooming her, not excusing any of that stuff. I'm just saying that is part of what made Marvin Gaye Marvin Gaye. But yeah, just think about it. I mean, he wants to be in control of this relationship, even though he would eventually be upset if Jan didn't fool around on him, which was just like, yeah, bruh, they got a term for that. I ain't gonna say it on this podcast, but those of you know, they got a term for what Marvin was trying to, and it's not an open relationship. I mean, it is, but anyway. But yeah, I think the other part that sticks out to me is like, Angel, though you're promiscuous, I don't mind a bit, cause you're still the greatest lay in bed. Like, he literally has just slut shamed this woman from head to toe and says, well, I know why you're like that, because it's that damn good. And it's just like, I imagine that had to be a mind trip for any woman, whether it was Jan or any woman that Marvin was seeing at the time. Like, you think so much of me, but you also think the least of me. If you're saying that, you want me to go do these things, but when I go do these things, you hate my guts afterwards. Very, very conflicted. But yeah, there's that song. And then there's Since I Had You. And there's, again, more woman moaning in the background. And, he's talking about, since I've had you, baby, there's been no other woman. And he just wants to get back together. He narrates, he's like, two lovers by chance, they meet at a neighborhood dance. And then, of course, there's Soon I'll Be Loving You. And there's this nice little instrumental beginning where there's like, you got these strings, you got the, the little conga in the beginning, and Marvin stretching in the background. Dreamed of you this morning, just before the dawn. And he's talking about, how he dreamed of loving this woman. And he also, there's a part in the song where he says, I've never done it before, but there's always a first time, and he starts chanting in the background, going to give you some head. I'm going to give you some head. Going to give you some head. Now, for 1976, apparently that was a very revolutionary thing, because oh boy, apparently that was not the norm back then. Because never forget, Richard Pryor had a skit on one of his albums. It was either Bicentennial N-word or That N-word's Crazy before it, when he said his uncle said, boy, don't ever, whatever you do, don't kiss no, I don't care what you do, don't kiss no. And Richard Pryor said, I couldn't wait to kiss them. And he said the woman had to beat him off. That's enough. Oh, 2 days. But yeah, I mean, I guess women didn't demand it as much as women do now. I mean, it's pretty much accepted that, if you are a person of heterosexual preferences, that y'all are going to kiss each other's parts. But apparently back then, men didn't like to kiss women's parts, which I found to be very strange. And so I guess Jan inspired that new facet of Marvin's personality and sexuality, even though the age gap made it very awkward. And especially remember, he's married again, he's married to Berry Gordy's sister, had been for 13 years, and she probably is good and ticked off that this man is talking about he gonna go down on his new girl when he probably never went downtown to the window shop. She's like, I know Anna was probably like, you better get your ass over here and practice on me first. You talking about? But hey, man, that was the 70s in a nutshell. Things just opened up, no pun intended, in a lot of different ways. And Soon I'll Be Loving You was just one of those songs. And we close out this album with After the Dance. After the Dance always stuck out with me because it was a song that I could not ever get the title to as a youngster because again, WDAS, Quiet Storm, Tony Brown. He used to play this song all the time when I was a kid. And I could never stick around long enough to figure out what the title was. I just, remember hearing, I want you. Like that song is just summer nights in Wilmington, Delaware, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to me. And he's talking. I mean, it puts a bow on the album. I mean, he met her, he saw her at the dance. He's talking about how much he wants her. He's the songs in the middle are really him reminiscing through their wild and crazy times together. And then, of course, now we come to the close of it after dance. The dance is almost over. It's like, we belong together. Like, I want you and you want me. So why don't we get together after the dance? It's that simple. And he's talking about how he was looking real good on the Soul Train. This isn't the first time Soul Train got a real good mention in 1976. We'll talk about that on another episode. But the overall, I Want You is kind of like love story, in set to music. Love means never having to say you're sorry or something in that regard. But this was Marvin. I mean, even though Leon Ware and T-Boy Ross had written and recorded most of this stuff ahead of time, Marvin was able to personalize everything to make it a true Marvin Gaye project, and that turned out to be really, really good for him. I mean, it was another. It fell below Let's Get It On because I think Let's Get It On was still in that early 70s stages where people were starting to discover different modes of sexuality. I mean, like back in the early 70s, they had, I've talked about it before on this podcast. They had this thing called key parties. Now, if you're not familiar with a key party is when married couples go to a party, they may drink, they may play cards, they may dance, they may eat, but you drop your house keys and car keys in a bowl and people pick them out, and whoever picks up somebody else's keys, that's who you went home with that night. So yeah, Let's Get It On was kind of like in that early stages of 70s sexual revolution when you think about key parties, second wave feminism, porn being in movie theaters now. Like that will always blow my mind. People went to movie theaters to watch adult movies. That is crazy to me. But that's what people did. And that's why Let's Get It On was so successful. But by the time you get to 76, you can sense that it's kind of slowing down the sexual revolution a little bit. I mean, people are still getting busy, but they're just not as open with it as they were. I mean, people understood that, okay, yeah, we'll say the early 70s was like, okay, this is fun. And now you get to the middle of the decade, it's like, yeah, we can still have our fun. People just don't need to know about it. So that's why I want you kind of sort of like fall short of what Let's Get It On did, because it wasn't the same music. It wasn't the same style of music. Like that was early 70s soul. Like you could argue that Let's Get It On in some stages is Southern soul, Southern 70s soul. And I Want You is pretty much mid 70s anti-disco because Marvin notoriously could not stand disco. And he just would not do a disco album. But I Want You has tenets of disco, but it's definitely straight ahead R&B still. I mean, there's jazz element to it too. There's nothing really disco-fied about I Want You. So that's my take on that album. I mean, it's still one of my Marvin Gaye favorites, but after listening to it after all these years, I've had it in my possession in some form or another for over 20 years now. And I mean, it still passes the test, but you have to look at it with a with a lens, with a different lens. And, as a 20 something, it just blew my mind. But now that I'm 40, it's like, yeah, I get why people sort of, you know, didn't buy it as much as they did. Let's Get It On, or even What's Going On, which we'll talk about later on this year. But it's still a great Marvin Gaye album. I mean, it's probably the last great one he had. Depends on how you feel about Here My Dear, or In My Lifetime, or Midnight Love, because those are the albums he put out before, his untimely passing one day before his 45th birthday when his dad shot him. But yeah, I think I Want You is the last great Marvin Gaye album. And it stands the test of time, but if you look into it with everything that we know about Marvin, it just feels like a very conflicting album from a very conflicted man. And that's what makes great art. I mean, art doesn't have to be, linear. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be sunshine and rainbows, or as Allen Iverson used to say about his relationship with Larry Brown, everything don't be peaches and cream all the time. So this album ain't peaches and cream, but still a very good album. So if you never listened to I Want You, please go listen to it. Come back, let us know what you think. But if you do remember I Want You by Marvin Gaye, please talk about it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And that's going to do it for this ride on the Groove Line. Greatly appreciate y'all as always. Contact information will be in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell so you're notified of all the new videos that drop on this channel. And don't forget to like and comment on these videos, because as you lovely folks do know, I do talk back in the comments. So thank you guys for riding with me on the Groove Line. And until the next time we ride, may you find the groove, or may the groove find you.